person, as some of you are. Good to see you. It looks like Steve and Alan. I know we have some guests as well. And of course, we are recording this for the record purposes of the City of Westminster. Guests, thank you for being here. Welcome. We are so glad to have you. Just as a reminder for our business, this is an advisory board, a recommendation board. We do not honor open comments or open meetings at this board. That being said, if you have any questions or you need some clarification, please reach out to myself or to city staff. Tonight, Jake Walls will be representing us, and we'll be happy to support and try to get some information to you. Welcome all. So we will jump right into the agenda. We'll open it up with anything that anyone wants to share, like people doing things that are exciting, something that's inspiring you in the community. I know it's a little hard to do a team builder when we're all, you know, kind of all over the place, so to speak, but anybody want to share out something that's inspiring to you, something that's happening in the community?
Alan here.
Oh,
I don't know if this
Alan.
is this is where I should give a quick report on the Westminster Homelessness Study Group, or should that come later?
We could do that as part of official business later, Alan, for sure.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. But I know that's also the work that you're doing is inspiring, so we'll look forward to hearing some of that great work. Anyone else want to share? Okay, we'll move right into the agenda. So we have, for our first item of business, let me get to the appropriate document, I believe is approving. Here, let me see here. Sorry, I'm losing things left and right over here. We are approving the previous minutes for April, I believe. So and I know we have, it's kind of interesting because we don't have presentations, but we do have new business that will be presentations. So that might be a little confusing. But looking at the April meeting minutes, is there any motion to approve them?
So moved.
Okay, Rich has moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Steve has seconded. It's been motioned and approved. Any discussion? Okay, hearing no call for discussion. All in favor of approving the April meeting minutes? Indicate. Is there anyone who is opposed to that approval? And is there anyone who chooses to abstain? Okay. So moved. Moving to our next item of business with our city council report, Mayor Pro Tem David DeMont.
Justin, is it possible to let our guests go first so we don't need to keep him any longer after a work day?
Absolutely. We can shift that around.
Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, is that
no,
okay?
it's okay. It is an official change order. Everyone good with the order change? Okay, I don't think we need an official motion as long as people are okay. All right, we can switch it around. So Mayor Pro Tem DeMont, you don't get to leave early. So sorry about that. Yeah, I know you're getting excited. But we will move into our new business item. We have two items up, park naming and proclamations. So we welcome our guest, Lance Johnson, for park naming. He's going to give us a little bit of information around how that relates and pertains to us. So Lance, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. So I'm Lance Johnson. I'm the Parks, Golf, and Open Space Manager. Tonight on your agenda with your packet, I believe you should have had a draft agenda memo for a request for another park renaming from Mr. Ted Tabakhorst. So what we've done is we brought this to the Parks, Recreation, Libraries, Open Space Advisory Board a couple of weeks ago, must have been late last month. They had a discussion about that. They made a recommendation, and so we also wanted to bring it to this board just to get your feedback and opinions on this renaming. Just to give you a little bit of background, we had an official policy, internal policy memo done just a little over 2 years ago, 2021 in April, when Don Tripp is our city manager, putting together a park renaming policy. So in those 2 years now, we've had 5 park renamings redone, and this will be our 6th one that we're considering now. So this has been fast and furious with the renamings, and so I think we brought, the last one we did was for our former city manager, Brent McFall. Just because of the timing of how that all came through, we got it to the PRL OS advisory board. We didn't get it to this board, but I wanted to make sure we got back to you because I think it's good. It's important. We have it in the policy to get to both boards if we possibly can, to have you review and kind of just provide feedback for us. And obviously, as a staff person, we're taking the recommendations that the board gives us. We put them in the agenda memo. And then obviously when they go to council for official business, that's when the council discusses them. And then they either vote yes or no on to approve or not approve that renaming. So if you've read the agenda, and I'm open to any questions or want to answer anything you may have if you've read the agenda.
Okay, and that was sent out as per Lance with the agenda. And it talked a little bit about sort of the reasoning, the overview of why that would be a renaming effort, and then also goes through some of the history of some of the current renaming efforts. Is that correct, Lance?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, yeah. So what would, Lance, just my question is, what would you want from this board? Do you want a timeline of like right now, we would like to review it and see if there are any issues? Do we have a timeline for the board that you want to have us look a little bit more in depth at it in a structured way? What would the ask be?
So I think I'm hoping to get a little bit of feedback tonight because we are currently on the May 22nd council agenda. So with our timelines, I've had to churn in our draft agenda. I'm hoping to get some type of recommendation from you tonight, if possible, that I can then add to the agenda memo to get it into the official packet for next week. We have these wonderful deadlines we have to meet for all of our packets. So council has a chance to get, be informed and read everything through before the actual meeting. So I was hoping to get some type of either feedback or information or recommendation from the board tonight, if that's possible.
Great. Thank you, Lance.
Quick
Go,
question.
please.
Does the Parks Board act on this recommendation?
So yes, they made a recommendation, their recommendation, and I'll just read it to you verbatim if I can find it.
Great.
Their recommendation was in their minutes, the board recommends a moratorium on renaming any city parks or open space, including any current proposals, to give staff time to evaluate the current policy and possibly develop a new renaming policy.
Okay. All right. So understanding that maybe for some of us, this might be a little bit newer. If we could maybe take just a few minutes and look over that proposal as was included in your agenda items. And then let's bring up some questions. If we could take maybe a couple of minutes, would that feel okay with everyone? Just to kind of look over this proposal? Good. The record shows at 6:12 will kind of bring us back at 6:15.
Get that look.
He's been on all the emails.
Oh, yeah.
Because I saw his look and I was like, oh, wait, there's more that you need to know. Yeah. Right.
While ago.
And I'll provide a little bit more background too, just kind of as the discussion at the open space advisory board meeting, just to kind of give you some context.
Looking at the time.
At my foot.
Oh.
Oh.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Gotta be up.
you let her in?
Yeah, I do.
Hi, Donna, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. We're just taking another minute or so to review. There were quite a few items with your agenda materials via email, one of which was the renaming proposal that the city has put forth. So we're just looking at that to see if we have any questions or any feedback for Lance so he can take that and move forward.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Justin, I have no
Okay.
objection.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rich. I was going to say, by my estimation, it is 6:15. Rich, thank you for that. Are there any further clarifying questions, any pauses, any think abouts that we can give to Lance? Rich says he has no objections after reading and reviewing the proposal.
Justin, I guess Lance, I just want to get a little more clarification on the Parks Committee's recommendation. It seems to me that city site naming policy is pretty clear. What were their concerns about that they recommended just put a moratorium on it at this point?
So most of the discussion centered around, we've had this, like I said, we've had this policy in place now for 2 years. And so this is currently our 6th renaming that's come before us. So if you kind of start doing the math, we have 63 parks. Within the next 15 or so years, we could potentially, at that rate, rename every one of our parks, which there's a cost associated with this also. With any renaming, we're obviously changing the signage. So if we can refurbish the sign that's at that park that's being renamed, roughly about just cost alone for the sign refurbishing is about $5,000. If we have to do a new sign, depending on what that might look like, the sign's completely in complete disrepair, just can't be refurbished, roughly about $10,000. So that doesn't include any staff time. That doesn't include any new concrete pads that have to be poured, any irrigation that may or may not have to be moved. If we're going to be moving the sign location, those types of things. So there is a significant cost, and if you start adding that up, I mean, if you kind of took the low end even of renaming every park, you're talking over the course of 10 to 15 years, $300,000 to $400,000 just in signage alone, not staff time or anything included in that. So I think the consideration was from the board was, is there a need to revisit the policy to maybe make it a little more, I'm trying to find a correct terminology. Not stringent, but maybe there needs to be a little bit more buy-in from the group that's proposing the name change, and maybe they propose, they come up with some funds to help fund some of the costs of replacing the signage, those types of things. Because at this point, virtually anybody could bring a proposal forward and let council go through it and whether approve or not to approve. I know that City Manager Freitag provided us their policy from Janesville that they would, and they actually, there's a cost associated with, and there's some other parameters too. They talked about if corporations were donating things, they could, rename parks for that. They had a bunch of different things, but there's some good things in the policy that maybe we need to consider potentially. And that's what we discussed about at that meeting last month. So it's just a matter of, do you think or may not think that, is the policy maybe just a little too loose? Maybe, you can virtually nominate anyone.
And anyone can bring.
And I think at least from a staff perspective, and Mayor Pro Tem may want to comment or not comment, but sometimes I think that puts council kind of on the spot a little bit. They have to make a decision, and which may be popular or unpopular sometimes if somebody is looking to have a park renamed after someone. And how do you balance person up here that's having a park renamed for them, and then somebody you would say, oh no, we're not going to rename a park for you. I mean, where's that criteria? Because there really is none in the policy if you look at it. It's just could be anybody. It could be staff. It could be a resident. I mean, resident could be anybody. So it's kind of it's a okay policy, I think, but I think the advisory board, Parks Recreation Board, thought maybe it needed to have a little more teeth to it, I think, in a general sense.
If I could weigh in on that, the city council are elected to make decisions that impact the city as a whole. One of the issues I would have with asking for literal buy-in, being able to donate something towards doing it, that sounds good on the surface, but that means only people who have the money to do it can do it. And that is not inclusive. So, I would have a problem with that. If you want to sort of slow down the renaming, we can do only so many a year. You may have other options. I hear where you're coming from, Lance. But I would have a problem with only people with money having the privilege of renaming.
Thank you, Rich. I see Seth and then Jillian's hand, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's anything noteworthy about the existing name.
The existing name of the park, so that's Trendwood Park, which is over by Betty Adams School. So Trendwood is the former house building company that actually used our sports center as their production site. And so that park is right adjacent to the old Trendwood production building. That's why it's named Trendwood for the builder back in whenever they were building back in, I guess, the late 60s, 70s.
I'm sorry to jump in, but wasn't that also part of the current policy? Because in the past, we have looked at whether or not parks had historical names. So I thought that was something that went through, because that came up when we were renaming the Ridgeway Park before I was even on council.
Mm-hmm.
Because that used to be, gosh, now I can't remember what it used to be.
I can't either right now. That's terrible. Yes, Chelsea Park.
Park.
Yes, exactly.
And so there was a question, is Chelsea somebody that were, taking that memory away from, but it ended up just a name they stole from across the pond.
So just for clarification, yes, you're exactly right. Most of the parks, a majority of our parks have been linked to England. So that's kind of where the nomenclature came from. They've used England as, Westminster, Chelsea Park. So a majority of our parks have been named for places or cities or historical things in England, kind of the Westminster, Colorado, Westminster, England, kind of the sister city type thing. That's kind of where most of the naming for the parks was taken from, to the day that, the last time we named a park would have been the newest park we've had, taking out Nature Play, which we brought on board last year. Westfield Village, I think, would have been the last park. And I'm not sure if Westfield actually relates to anything in England, but that was kind of the direction back in the day when we were building parks, at a pretty quick pace and using the names from England.
Yeah. Seth, did that clarify? Great. So Jillian, please.
Yeah, my question was more of a follow-up now on Seth, because I seem to remember that we had done a review of the names of public parks and public areas a couple of years ago, because we were wanting to make sure that we weren't maybe honoring some people or some ideas that might be problematic under our current zeitgeist. And so I wanted to see if there was anything in the naming policy. There's a lot of positives in there about wanting to name local people, indigenous people, and being thoughtful and considerate in the names that we do choose. But I wonder if there's anything in there about making sure that we're not saying, all right, it's been 40 years, no one knows who you are anymore, kick your name off of a sign, we're going to put somebody else up on there. If we're taking the name of a park from like a company, I as an individual, I'm okay with that. But I want to make sure that we're not taking another person's name who maybe this should be a chance to learn some history.
So I guess we as staff, we have started looking at a potential new draft of a new policy, taking some other ideas. One of those is once a park is renamed, it couldn't be renamed for 25 years. So, if we get to that point, that would be something that would be in that draft. Could it be 40 years? Could it be 15 years? I don't know, but I think there should be probably a time frame when if a park is going to be renamed, that you would at least have it there long enough that it would impact the community, obviously, and not something that would be just changed on a very regular basis. Let's put it that way.
I have a quick comment, Lance. I'm more familiar with naming of parks around geographic locations, because people often use parks one of the wayfinding methods.
Right.
So after a neighborhood organization or the community that it's part of, or sometimes a roadway even. I think I'm inclined to follow along with the Parks Board's recommendation, that we give it some more thought as to what naming could be, because like you had mentioned, it looks to me like this is an open box. Anybody can come forward and name it. They don't even need a council person to co-sponsor the renaming of it. And that's, from my perspective, a little maybe too loosey-goosey.
I think one thing to think about, like with all your input, is this is fairly new,
Mhm.
to Lance's earlier point. And I've been involved with a handful of these even before I was on council. So I don't think that any of this is bad. I think this is one of those policies that we didn't have anything before. And it's probably, okay, how's this working out? I think, just this is my perspective. I'm not speaking for council, I'm speaking for Dave. But, I would think that there needs to be thought put in it around like money, if you're going to look at that we're not closing it off, because I think of one that I did co-sponsor for, I don't know how many of you know Tom Romansberger, which I think was one of the first ones we took through the process.
It was the first one, actually, and I think we actually started the process before we had the actual policy in place, but yeah, that was the first one we did.
We renamed the ball fields at Countryside, and he didn't, that wasn't like a money thing for him, but like if you look at the perspective, just as a good example, he was the one who fundraised to make those ball fields happen. So without Tom, there would be no ball field. So it made sense. And, my son was giving me a hard time because Tom's last name doesn't really roll off the tongue. He was, very dedicated to the Countryside community, and everybody, that's been there a long time knew him. But I think that, Rich, you have a really good point for a lot of different reasons. So, and I'm sure staff will think through that stuff as you go through that. But I'm glad that we even have this policy, because before it was just really, does council say yes or no, I think.
Exactly.
And I think that the idea puts more of an imprint on the community, not just 7 people on council. So it's not, the traverse riches. It's just, you don't know, it wasn't somebody who was buddies with somebody on council or something like that, because I think that that's not super productive either. So I'm glad we have some sort of policy, and it probably makes sense now, a couple of years in, for you to come back with some tweaks.
So I will say that whether you're okay with moving this forward, putting your recommendation that we should move this forward, that's fine. Or if you would align with the PRL Open Space Advisory Board, that's fine too. I'm not here to sway you either way. We have, once this goes through to council, however they vote on the 22nd, we have decided we are going to halt this process for a little bit. We are going to get a really good draft policy together and start revisiting what that looks like. We will certainly bring that policy to both boards to have you review it and kind of give us some more feedback, because the inclusivity thing was also brought up with our other board also. I mean, it obviously something that we need to be cognizant of. And like Rich said, money is a factor. And, some people may be very deserving of having a park renamed after them, but cannot afford to have a park renamed after them. So how do you balance that? And where does that, how do you vet that out and make that decision about who has to pay and who doesn't have to pay? That's a difficult process to kind of figure out, to make it fair for everybody. So we are going to, no matter what happens on the 22nd, we are going to take a pause, as I guess our director called it, a moratorium. And, anything that comes in during that time, we're just going to tell them, hey, we're just going to hold on for a while. We're going to draft a new policy. We're going to look at some other policies, get a few more ideas, and then we're hoping to maybe make this a little more robust in a sense, I guess. But we'll certainly want your feedback on that one way or the other.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So it sounds like there are 2 issues at stake: the content itself, which seems like that is fine, but then the policy that drives how we do these pieces. So, okay. Any other question, any other challenges or issues? Points of feedback. Seth, please.
I'll just say, it seems to me like from the inclusivity standpoint, with regard to this specific renaming, I don't think anything has come up that says, that we would say, oh, this is a bad idea. And so certainly that seems fine from our perspective. And from the perspective of updating the policy, I think Rich's concern is sort of the main one. Rich and Jillian's concerns are the main ones. Just to sum up what everybody has said.
Yep. And yeah, thank you very much. So I think, without making an official motion, unless anyone objects, it feels like the content, again, there's no challenge with the content as far as inclusivity. And we definitely want to be a part of the policy revisions if possible. So.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Does that give you enough information to move forward, Lance?
I think if you would, maybe could make an official
Sure.
motion for a recommendation, include kind of taking what you just said and put that officially in the record.
Yep.
That I could then have and I can stick directly into the draft memo as I did from the PRLOS board. That would be great. That way I can be very consistent with that and I have a specific direction from the board that is voted on, basically.
Okay. So would anyone like to call a motion? Seth, your hand's up, or you? No, you're muted. Sorry.
No, that's just leftover. My laptop is misbehaving.
No. Okay.
Per motion, Justin.
Okay, Steve.
I move that our advisory board recommend that we follow the Parks, Recreation and Open Space Advisory Committee's recommendation to put a hold on renaming of parks until the policy has been reviewed by both council and staff, with possible revisions in the future.
Okay, thank you, Steve. That's been motion. Is there a second? Okay, Jillian is a second. Okay, now it's open for discussion. Rich, you have something to say, please?
Lance, is that what you need, or do you need a specific recommendation on renaming Trendwood?
So I just want to make sure we're very clear. So the Open Space Advisory Board recommended that, like I said, I don't want to misspeak from them, that there a moratorium on the renaming of city parks or open space, including any current proposals. So this draft that I have that you've run through tonight, they are proposing or recommending that it be held back for now, and then I'm guessing we would revisit it once we do a new policy, basically. So just want to make sure that this board understands what their recommendation was.
Okay.
And remember, it's just a recommendation, as you stated at the first of the meeting, Justin. It's a recommendation. Council obviously will look at the memo, read through that, and they obviously make their own decisions on whether to move that forward or not. But like I said, we will, as a staff, we will be stopping any renamings for now. After this one goes to council on the 22nd, we will be doing a new draft policy, get that out to everybody and review that and get that new policy put together before we start moving another process forward for any renamings that would come to us.
Okay,
Thank you.
I thought you said that would include this current one.
That's what the Parks Recreation Library Board, that's what they stated in there, so include this one. So I just want to make sure that you understood that that's what their recommendation was.
Okay.
Because I was hearing different from others. Some were saying, go ahead and do this when it's okay, I was hearing. And then Steve kind of said it a little different in the motion. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was very clear on what our other board did.
So as a reminder, go ahead.
We can amend that motion either way. Lance, can you sort of summarize what their thinking was in including this current proposal in the moratorium?
I think in general sense, I mean, I think they were concerned about the inclusivity. I mean, as one of the board members put, this isn't quite exactly right, but she stated that, all of our parks that are being renamed right now are for old white men. Yeah. I mean, basically, and that's what she said. So there is a point to that, I guess, in a sense, when it comes to inclusivity, I guess, if you're, looking at it that way. So in that lens, so I think that's kind of where they went as the board, as they had more discussion about it. I think they were just trying to make sure that I think the main point was to be as inclusive as possible. And is the current policy doing that? Or is there a better way to write that policy to make things as inclusive as we possibly can? So that's what, and that's why to review it before we were moving anything else forward.
Well, and so I would still think that, Steve, your original motion would stand because it falls in line with what has already been recommended. You can word it differently, but I would say unless someone wants to strike and call for a revision or an amendment. Donna, please.
Yes, I was going to say, would there be any value to add to that motion? And as per the mission of the Inclusivity Board, highly recommend the other language. Would that only muddy the waters, or does it give a little more emphasis or a little more teeth to it? Because if we follow what, maybe not mission, but charge from the council, it does say we are doing what we have been charged to do. Would that be of any value? Or does that only muddy the waters?
No, I hear what you're saying, Donna, and I think that's a good point. I think that could come maybe as we look at the policy itself, because the recommendation is to kind of halt and put a moratorium on this piece so we can examine policy. And I think the next step would then be, let's include inclusivity in that policy is what I would think, but I'm open to feedback. Does that make sense?
I'd like it to just stay as stated, the way Steve had it.
Okay. But Donna, to your point, I think it will be a strong recommendation that I imagine we can anticipate moving forward once this goes to the next level of work, which is examining that policy specifically.
Sure. And I think it's important that we, as the Inclusivity Board, be inclusive and encourage this sort of inclusivity on the part of the council and whatever things are being changed and all. So I think this gives us that step in the right direction and puts some teeth in what we do.
Totally
Yeah,
agree.
well stated. Thank you. Okay, other points of discussion? Questions, clarification? All right. We have a motion that has been seconded that's on the table per Steve. So all in favor of accepting? Oh, go ahead.
Justin, can we restate the motion?
Sure.
Please.
All right, what I have written is Inclusivity Board recommends following the PRL board recommendations for a moratorium on current and future renaming and review of an updated policy before moving forward.
Okay, can we change that instead of following to concur with?
Sure.
Steve, is that acceptable to you as the original person who made the
Excellent
motion?
friendly amendment.
Okay, Jillian, you seconded. Was that okay with you? I don't know if she's here, so.
Yes,
There's
I
the-
saw
Okay.
not.
Oh, okay,
I'm
perfect.
here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I got
no.
dog's being extra noisy tonight, so I'm leaving the camera and the mic off. I'm sorry.
No
But yes,
worries.
that sounds great to me.
Okay, so we've amended that language. Is that acceptable, Rich? Okay, so all in favor of adopting this motion? Aye?
Aye.
Or raise hands? Is there anyone that is opposed? Let it be known in the chat, Miguel is stated he's in favor as well, please. Is there anyone that chooses to abstain?
That's where we're getting old. He wasn't old.
I believe the
Okay.
chat says that Michelle is in favor. I don't see an
Oh,
answer
Michelle.
from Miguel in there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's me.
No, I'm sorry,
That's
Michelle.
okay.
It cut your name off. I apologize. So Michelle is in favor, so please amend that record. Okay. Does anyone choose, and Miguel's in favor too. Great. Does anyone see, I guess I'm just predicting the future. That's all. Is there anyone that chooses to abstain? Okay, and no opposition. Okay, so moved. Lance, thank you very much for bringing that to the table. Thank you for the clarification. That can get a little bit, it's sort of a meta of meta, but we appreciate your thoughtfulness in bringing that to us and soliciting our feedback.
No, I appreciate all the feedback. Like I said, I'll get the official motion I guess Seth will send those notes to Cody. She'll get those to me. I will get them in the agenda, and that's what we'll state in the agenda memo on the bullets. And then we'll go to council on the 22nd and go from there. So
awesome.
And once we get a draft, once we start a new draft policy, no matter what, we will certainly get this out to both boards and allow you plenty of time to give feedback and whatnot on the draft agenda. So
perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. That I think that will be, to Donna's earlier point, some of the bulk of what we want to really stamp a little bit. So
Thank you, Lance.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Everybody have a good
Thanks
night.
for including
Mayor
us.
Pro Tem, thanks for letting me usurp your time here and
Sorry.
go in front of
That's
you.
me. I should apologize.
yeah, no worries.
I know he's been had it since breakfast, so.
At
You
least.
upset with me?
You had breakfast.
All right, thank you. So we'll go back. We can come back to the proclamations a little bit because I think that is self-contained. Is that correct, Cody?
Yeah.
So
that can be
that's
a separate.
That's just us. Okay, perfect. So, well, let's go back to our council report with our Mayor Pro Tem, David Demott. Dave.
Remember what we reported on last time. We talked about comp plan last time. It was with you. Big changes. I think the biggest things that we've done in the last month is we gave direction on the water plant, which was, we went with the recommended option that I think they were referring to it affectionately as option 4 for the water plant, which is kind of a shrunk down version of what we were going to do in 2025, and it saves about $100 million and gets us in a better place with our water system. So
Sorry to interrupt, but could you face the middle of the table a little more? I'm having trouble hearing.
sure, is the mic on this side or
It's
is it
that-
here?
Oh, it's because the things are on top of it. You're fine.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are
Thanks.
cup holders on the microphone. So, I don't know if you want me to repeat that, Seth, or if you caught the gist of it.
If you wouldn't mind, just real quick.
No, not at all. So I was saying that we approved the water plant option 4, which is basically kind of a shrunk down version of, well, not shrunk down version. They kind of what they called right sized the plant on Westminster Boulevard, which is what we were going to do in 2025. And to make it simple and not take up too much time, it basically gives us a lot of new functionality at that plant, saves $100 million, and then gives us really to be set up in the future to be able to add additional what they call water trains. And so what staff has done over the last year is they went back and looked at what our actual water needs are. So the plan for 2025 was based off of certain use. When they went back and looked at conservancy trends over the last decade, they actually realized that there's less use than what they had anticipated. So if they would have went forward with the plan as was, we would have actually had a much bigger water plant than we need, which would have cost a lot more money for a lot of different reasons between piping, the actual plant, and some other specifics around it. So that is moving forward, and there's actually been some direction from staff to do some of the contracts for design work. So then in the future, I think before we meet again, I think if I looked at the notes right, they're going to be coming back with finance options for us.
Yep. There we go.
The next big thing that we did was we gave direction on to start moving forward to do financing for our municipal court. That's something that's been in the works for some time as far as what we need. We have a concept of as far as what we're going to do to replace the municipal court. And so that is underway. There was one other thing I was going to share. I'm just trying to remember what it was. Court, water.
I feel like that's all we've talked about for months. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like there was one other thing that we moved forward that I was going to mention and I've lost my train of thought. Any questions on those items?
Yeah, what are the costs around the municipal court upgrades?
So that's a good question. And so initially the cost was in the 20 plus million, mid 20 million, I think is what they had told us. It came back higher at like 42 once
And we don't know actual cost yet because we haven't done actual design. But one of the things that was talked about at our last study session before we gave official vote direction to move forward was, if you know, Rich, there's the Community Reach Center that is on that same campus where the municipal court is. And Community Reach is housed in the old library next to the courthouse that used to be the old city hall. We leased that out. We don't know, that building is built at the same time as the courthouse. We don't know, you know, exactly their intention when their lease is up. And I think they told us their lease is up in a year or so. And so the question became, well, if we're gonna, you know, we obviously want to build out the courthouse to be, you know, future proof so that we're not, you know, we would just have to rehab versus rebuild. The current court wasn't, it wasn't purpose built. It was originally City Hall, then it was police department. There's, you know, a lot of history of what they've used that building for. There's some structural problems with that building as well as some operational challenges with it. So point being though, if we're going to purpose build a court center, what all do we want it to be? And Community Reach as well as some other partners really interface with the court a lot. So do we want to build enough space for to house some other things? And Community Reach is what the conversation started. I was the one who kind of pushed that conversation a little different and said, well, what about our other partners such as like, you know, Jefferson Center or CASA or any of the other things, especially when, you know, we have our wellness court that we've been working on. And, you know, there's been the discussion about what justice looks like as far as, you know, from policing to, you know, the full cycle and being able to, you know, get people out of the system that maybe wouldn't be there if they had the right resources. So the direction was, hey, yeah, let's definitely talk about whether or not we need space for that, but don't be as narrow as just Community Reach. Because, you know, there's other things that might make sense. So that will weigh into ultimate cost, what they decide to do with some of that stuff. But I think they wanted to know, is that something that council had an appetite to have them look at when they move forward? So that is part of that discussion. And so that, to your original question, cost depends on what they do with a lot of that conversation. But I think that they were talking about, you know, having a number of 42 million, which please understand, that's like a place mark. That doesn't necessarily mean we're definitely going to spend 42. That just, you know, they think that comfortably they could get there and have room so that they're not coming back and realizing that cost is too much. Part of what's also got challenging is the cost of construction keeps going up and up. So, you know, it's another reason to, you know, maybe get moving with that. And I to me, and again, this was a point I made, and I, you know, the other members of the council, you'd have to ask them their opinion, but access to justice, I think, is probably one of the most important things that we do as a city. So I think that this is really important that we have good access with, you know, safe access in a good functioning court. So I think this is a really exciting move for the city to start seeing this actually move somewhere aside from us just collecting money because we know we need it. And I guess the last thing I would say is the funding mechanism is partly the cash that we have on hand. And then we are looking at doing COPs as a funding mechanism to borrow the funds to actually make this happen.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It's encouraging to hear that there's a conversation about when we say justice, what are we talking about? Yeah, is it just one more one more brick in the carceral system, or will there be aspects of restorative justice? I think that's a good conversation to have.
Oh, I agree, and I think ultimately, societally, my opinion, and I think that you see this throughout our organization with the way that the judge does things, and from our co-responders with the police department, we're really looking at the goal is to get people out of the cycle, right? Obviously, there's some folks that we need off the street for safety reasons, but ultimately, if we can figure out what helps people get out of that cycle, that's better for our city. And so, whatever that takes to be able to get those resources, I think is important. And I think mental health is obviously a big component of that. Oftentimes, drug abuse and things of that nature, which often is fueled by unchecked mental health problems. So I think it needs to be, to your point, a bigger discussion than just getting people through in and out of court and, potentially punitive things. We want to figure out how we actually ultimately help people not get into that situation. For the life of me, I can't remember what other big things. I mean, those are huge things. Oh, short-term rentals. I was going to mention that. Thank you, Cody. We did pass a ordinance to have a rule around the Airbnbs and short-term rental. Some people hate them, some people like them, but ultimately they are happening, and we didn't have anything on the books. And so just real high-level summary, because I don't remember all the details of exactly what it is, but basically one individual could have one license for one property. And so it has to be tied to that. So there was a lot of talk around if people could get around that. There are ways, but ultimately, if we figured out that you were doing more than one, that would be a violation of your license. If you think where there's some really big wins in that, we've had problems with like say party houses and stuff. And then it's like, who owns it? If they're being licensed and we're forcing a license, and if they are licensed, we know who to go after. If they're running one that's not licensed, then we have a tool to say, hey, you're not licensed. So it adds some tools to combat some of the problems that we've had around the folks that are running Airbnbs. And so there's a lot of different feelings around the subject, but I think that that's something where it's a lot like the sign thing. It's a starting point. I wouldn't by any means think that we're not going to tweak it in a year of it being in operation. But it's a good starting point for us to have something on the books, because that's an area that we've heard a lot of conversation around. And I think our neighbors are starting to come up with regulation, which we did pull a lot and kind of talk to our neighbors. What are you doing that's working? What have you done that didn't work? And try to come up with something that works for Westminster.
Yeah, I mean, from a different perspective, I'd be curious to see like how those Airbnbs, like, because we have such a critical, we're at a critical point for our housing inventory for, affordable housing. If that's negatively impacting the inventory because people are trying to capitalize without licensing, without oversight, essentially, I'd wonder it's kind of the correlation of that in studies as well. Not that you have that information, but.
Well, that is actually part of the, I appreciate that you actually brought that up, Justin, because that's part of the conversation, or it has been part of the conversation. I don't know that we have a good feel on that, but this will also kind of help us get some data. So one of the other things that's coming up real soon is our housing assessments needs. I don't know if I said that right. Needs or housing needs assessment. That's the right way to say it. That's coming up to be redone. Part of what's been on hold for them to do that was the comp plan. Now that they've done the comp plan, they're going to look at that assessments or needs assessments so that they can look at like balance of, okay, we know this is what we're going to allow to be built from here forward. How much of that should be affordable? How much of that should be single family? Like, so that we're still being mindful and not just saying, okay, everything's, this mix, to make sure that we continue to look at all those different components. But this Airbnb definitely feeds into that. And it has fed into the conversation around, well, how many should be allowed and stuff, because, we're hoping that that helps limit that too, so that, they're not all getting bought up to become Airbnbs versus places for folks to actually reside.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts, or comments or shares for Mayor Pro Tem DeMoss? Okay. Thank you for that update, sir. We appreciate you and appreciate that work. And yeah, we'll be interested to see how that rolls out a little bit on all those farms. And Rich, I appreciate your thoughtfulness around, I think, we need to, and Dave, you said this too, we need to look at justice maybe in a more holistic, absolutely a more holistic way. There's no maybe about it. And look at how we can really try to support people that are in crisis rather than punish them in a punitive way that may or may not be effective. Actually, much research suggests it is not. So, yeah. So thank you for all that. Okay, well, we're jumping around a little bit on our agenda, moving back into our proclamations. So for Pride Month and Juneteenth, Cody.
Jake was lovely enough and sent the agenda memo from last year and the proclamations for both Juneteenth and Pride Month. This year, the schedule works in a way that they could both be read by council on the same night, our first meeting in June, which is the 12th. In order to do the proclamation, we do ask that representatives of the board who's putting it forward are there. And I should also mention that council approves which proclamations will go in front of them on a sort of like as they come up, and then also on a regular basis. And so they have said, yes, we bring these forward. They're supportive of it. I just need any sort of edits or details. They're literally the two from last year. That's what's in our system now for the June 12th meeting. So we don't have to have a conversation here, but if there are edits, I know Miguel and Piper and I think Jillian, Michelle maybe all gave really good feedback last year. And so these are sort of in the best light as they were going into this year. If you could send me any additional changes to these current versions, not the memo, but the proclamations themselves, or the memo, I guess, because they're similar too. Say by next Monday afternoon or next Monday at 5, then I can make sure they get in the system in a timely fashion. Is that fair? So I think they're pretty well written. They've been through a number of iterations, so I don't know that, but that would be my suggestion since we only have 30 minutes left.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. And then we have it as a standing piece. If the Inclusivity Board is truly the one sponsoring it, we probably ought to have a motion of some sort to actually move the pieces forward.
And your meeting in June will happen after that council meeting. So.
Yeah. So I guess right now I would maybe suggest, understanding that we have some time in a window to put together some draft language to get to Cody and feedback by Monday afternoon. Would there be a motion to accept these two or to represent these two proclamations as written and or with suggestions and adjustments? Would there be a motion for that? Steve?
I need a bit of a clarification on the Juneteenth motion.
Sure.
It references the 13th day of June, 2022. Is that meant for this year or?
No, you're seeing last year's version.
Okay.
But no edits have been made to date. So
Thank you.
The draft that's technically in the system right now says June 12th, 2023.
Yes. And that has to be acted on every?
Yeah, it has to be updated every year. So I have to manually take that and copy and paste it again for next year into a new resolution.
Doesn't
into a new
Juneteenth
proclamation.
stay on the same date every year?
Juneteenth is always June 19th.
June 19th?
But the proclamation happens at that meeting. So the mayor makes it on June 12th. That's what that date is.
Got it.
So it's always this June 19th, 2023, but she signs it on this day. Does that make sense?
It makes sense except for one thing. If we want to celebrate Juneteenth, which is June 19th, why don't we celebrate it all the time? We don't need a motion every year.
There's no reason. It's because it just brings community awareness to it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Like any other proclamation, Mayor Pro Tem, we do domestic what is it? The victims advocates every year. We do dispatchers every year. We do sexual assault awareness. We do child abuse awareness. We do them annually. There's many that we do annually because it brings community awareness and it acknowledges that we support those.
I'm fine with that. That's the rationale.
Constitution Week, National Day of Prayer. There's a series of them that are sort of on an annual schedule. Depending, the council changes every 2 years, so they get to say yes or no every year when we get to this point, you know.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we've, as this current council, and obviously it depends, every, council could be different, but like we have, like, cause sometimes these are community driven. So like we had, I'll mess it up. There was a certain religious one we were asked to do that was this last Monday. And I don't want to butcher the name of it, but they asked us to do it the year before and we did it and nobody came. So this year specifically, council said that, if they're going to bring one if like a community or anybody brings one forward, we want somebody there to accept it. Otherwise you're not really how are you really bringing awareness to it?
Right.
Because a lot of times the groups will be able to say something about, whatever group we're doing a proclamation for. So that was one thing that we've been a little bit more stringent on, is like, if you want one, we want somebody there to accept it. So it's not just a council person necessarily reading it. Obviously that's up to our discretion. There's certain ones that probably don't matter, like Constitution Week probably wouldn't matter, but I don't think really these would probably either. We would probably still do these ones, but I think you guys being an inclusivity board makes a lot of sense for you to be there for both of these.
Yes.
Okay. Steve, did that clarify your
That's really
question?
helpful.
Okay, great. So I would say once again, since the implication here is that we would move these forward and be the representations, is there a motion to take these proclamations forward to council?
Your turn.
Well, I think technically Steve and Alan are still alternates because we have a 9-member board. So it really needs to be somebody who's on teams.
I move it. I so move.
Thanks, Seth.
Seth is moving.
Alternates anymore.
You're still alternates until we're down to 9 members.
Does that other one count then, that he made?
Yeah, might have to have another sponsor.
Yeah, you probably need to have somebody else make it. Sorry, because there's still 9. So
retroactively move
your
that one also.
members when there's not a quorum, and since
When we originally made quorum,
Yeah, there
they
was,
were the members.
they were the
yeah,
members.
they were the members. So
Okay, then that makes sense.
I don't know how that works when the people
Yeah.
show up after.
We'll just let that go. So Alan could make this motion if Seth doesn't, or maybe Alan, you want to second it? Sorry.
I'll second because I don't have the thoughts in mind what exactly to say on this.
Yeah, I think Seth, I heard Seth move to accept.
okay, and we have a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any discussion? Just keep in mind that you do have an opportunity to take any feedback or draft to Cody by Monday at 5. If you have information, Donna, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm voting ahead of time. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, no worries.
He's excited.
Yeah, I thank you for your enthusiasm. So, Doug.
I will take my head down.
I was just curious if there's going to be, if we're giving the comments directly to Cody and she'll compile those, or are we going to try to come to some sort of a consensus on what we want the final form to look like?
So the only thing I can change in any of that are words, just for clarification. There's a strict format on both resolutions and council agenda memos. If it's content and words, send it to me and I will send out a version to everybody. So for their awareness. Since we're voting on it. Yes.
Yeah, and Doug, I think that's a good point, and acknowledging all of the work that many of the members of this council or this board did to make these current drafts that are presented before us. So I think having a feedback venue and then Cody sharing that out, and then if there are any further issues, we can talk through those.
Looks like Doug's cat is approving.
And then that keeps us still from not having a public meeting. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hi, Seth. Sorry. Justin, did you see Seth waving?
Oh, Seth, please.
I was waving at the cat.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, there's
Great.
that.
Okay. All right, so we have had some discussion and we've got the motion on the table. All in favor, please indicate. Okay, is there anyone opposed? Does anyone choose to abstain? Michelle, we do have you on record as being in favor. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much all. Moving on to our next agenda item, get back here to our agenda for today. Going into, of course, since we're in a hybrid mode, feel free to take care of yourselves. If you need a break, feel free to do that. But going into subcommittee reports, I know that we've got a little bit of information around the goal setting piece. We can get to that. But Alan, you wanted to share out about some of your experience in reaching out and working with our navigators. So please.
I had a quick question first.
Oh, go ahead, Seth.
Did you want to do another call for volunteers to accept the proclamation?
Yes, please.
Oh, you mean to? Oh, yes, we can do that. I plan to be there, but yes, if you are interested in attending and accepting the proclamation, please let Cody know that and myself via email. And that is June 12th. Is that correct date? That meeting on June 12th, Cody?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry because I suddenly, my meeting, my Microsoft Teams like suddenly did something strange. So I can't see any of you right now, but.
So yes, I'll be verbal.
I'm having the same problem. I'm trying
Yeah.
to get back in.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Seth, for that. So if you are interested, I do intend to be there and would love for any of you to join, and we can accept the proclamations on the behalf of the Inclusivity Board.
Would it be helpful if Jake and I added that to your calendars that night? Did a calendar invitation? Okay.
That would be
So
great.
city council meeting, the pre-meeting starts at 6:30. The meeting itself starts at 7. We just ask that you're there a little before 7 because the room sometimes fills up just depending. So the other night, standing room only. So,
Great. Okay. All right. Now moving into subcommittee reports updates. Alan, you were going to share out about your experiences in what you're doing with work and reaching out to our displaced families and persons and populations. So please.
We have in working with the Westminster Legacy Foundation, we've established Westminster Homelessness Study Group. It's a much gentler term than task force. Although I prefer task force because we are tasked. We had, I think, our third meeting just Monday, and we're looking at a multi-prong effect. We're trying to get things such as laundry truck, shower trucks that we used to have. We want to explore this again. There are 2 faith-based groups that now have every month, 3 Thursdays out of the month, we have dinners that are available, and we're letting the unhoused community know about that. And so some of these are kind of, it's to bring the community in, I guess, out from the cold and just interact with the rest of the community. We're also looking into the future as to what we may be able to propose to the city as far as wherever the data takes us. So we're looking 6 months, 10 months, a year plus to gather information. We have some high-powered people who will be joining us, including a gentleman by the name of Donald Burns. He's a retired professor from the University of Denver. He is the author of it used to actually be called the Burns Center at DU. The name has changed, but he's the author of a report that gave recommendations to Adams County about how to do how they should handle homelessness, where the positive aspects and where the negative aspects actually occur. So he will be joining us at our next meeting to provide us with good, solid information and a direction as for a study group to get all of our data together. So we're reaching out to the community. We will probably be bringing in people from the city manager, perhaps Parks and Recreation and Library. We will meet with them. We want to look for safe parking spaces. Brought this up last time. Also safe outdoor spaces, such as what the St. Francis Center has. So we're going to be exploring all of these avenues. And we're trying to bring in as partners the one voice that isn't heard are the actual unhoused that are out on the streets. That's been tough to do. So that's where we are at with this study group, and there'll be more as we gather more information. And at some point, we will present it to City Council.
Great, Alan. Thank you for that rich update. Are there any questions or points of clarification or share outs for Alan?
Alan, have you thought about any help that this board could provide in terms of the study group and its process?
Probably at this point, no. I think the Inclusivity Board has its directions. And I think at some point, as we gather information, Steve, then we'll be able to say, this would be great for Inclusivity to assist us.
I think it's a strength that it's a grassroots group that arises from the community.
I agree, Rich. Yeah. Okay. Alan, thank you for that update and that work. We know it's you're an advocate for our community and people who, don't have stable homes or homing situations. So thanks again for just that work and the efforts that you put forth continually. Okay. Thank you. So moving into a next update, you also received in your email with the agendas draft of an April 2023 Westminster Inclusivity Board Strategic Plan. A group of us basically came together and worked to specifically align the city's newly adopted strategic plan with that of kind of where we were. So it shifted it really kept the focus of our work, but it also helped us really build into what the scope of our work was. So that was sent out for your review. Committee members included Rich, I believe, Alan, and Steve, and I feel like I'm missing someone. But if they don't know I'm missing them, I guess. No, I'm sorry, who was that?
Michelle,
I'm missing you tonight. I was like, Michelle, yes, Michelle was an active part of that as well. I apologize. So we had all come together and just kind of went through and made sure that the goals were more in sync with the city strategic plan, both in format and in scope of what we're trying to do. If you look at the strategic plan, you'll notice, for example, under the first point, I mean, obviously our mission and vision are very much intact. And then you see on the first page at the bottom, alignment with City of Westminster strategic plan. And then we looked at the priorities that we felt most were connected with inclusivity in some way. And we took those priorities from the city, and then we tried to establish some King priority 1, for example, goals. And you can see kind of how those line up and what that looks like. So the one thing that had come out of that is we wanted to make sure that we had measures of success. And unlike previous strategic plans, it was very clear that we had basically the frame of 1 year to have this plan sort of reflected. It wasn't like it was a multi-year plan. So we will continually revisit this plan. And I imagine that we'll continually update it as a board going forward. Questions for myself or the committee that worked on this? Okay, yeah, please, Doug.
I confess I have not read through it in any detail and compared it. Were there substantive changes made to it, changing our goals, or was it just formatting and associations?
The one I think, and others, please feel free, there weren't very big changes. I think the alignment was the key. And also, in my opinion, and others can feel free to pitch in, of course, but it made the goals around the priorities a little bit more measurable. Instead of these sort of just standing statements, it gave us some benchmark of success, or like, okay, when do we actually complete this? Or this is something we need to work toward, so that we have sort of an actual benchmark to show our progress toward that goal. I would say that would be the biggest change. Rich, Michelle, Steve, Allen, would you agree? Disagree?
Yeah, well said. Agree.
So the committee had moved to work through this, and I know we were empowered by the board. I think it would probably make sense to make a motion to officially adopt it. That being said, I really do want you to take some time with this. So if everyone feels comfortable, we can make that motion at our next meeting so that you have a time to review it. But please be prepared that that will come forward. And of course, if there are any feedback points, please send them to me. I'll make sure to get them to the committee. And if we need to, we can reconvene if there are major changes or things that you want included. We could look to support that. Donna.
I would like to move that we table the action on this until the next meeting when we've had more time.
Okay, that's been motioned. Is there a second? Okay, Alan, and I see Doug, so it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion that Donna put forth? Is there any opposed? And does anyone choose to, there's a question in the chat. Let me get to that.
Vote.
And move that. Miguel asks, will there be will there be discussion to ensure alignment to the new goals after we move forward with them? Yeah, we certainly can relook at that, Miguel. I think that's good. If you look at it now and you feel like there are substantive changes that we need to make, please forward those to us, and we can convene as a committee and invite whoever has feedback to that table, I think, and then we can make sure that we have a solid draft moving forward. That being said, there's a timeline. So if you could review for any changes and maybe get those to us by the end of like next week, I would say, like hopefully give everyone some time. then we can move forward and make sure that everyone's included in the discussion if they feel like there's a need for clarification or for a strong revision. Okay, thank you. I believe, and did that answer your question, friend? Make sure that I know chat is hard.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of want to make sure. I'll look at them. I haven't looked at them. I don't think I'll suggest many changes or any at all, but it might just be like a recentering for us.
Yeah.
Make sure that we're using those goals to move forward, and that we, are in alignment with our efforts with those moving forward. I guess that's just kind of what I'm thinking a little bit further ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And I do think that we could even have a standing item to where we maybe do, once these are adopted, we do a standing check about what's the progress toward each of these goals and how do we ensure that they're being met.
I agree completely.
So, okay, great. So hearing no other points of discussion, the motion still stands. All in favor of tabling this vote until our next meeting in June? Okay. Thank you. Is there any opposition? And does anyone choose to abstain? So moved. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll open it up to any points of update that we need to have or anything that would be good for this group to know before we close out for the evening. Any events? Yes, please, Mayor Pro Tem.
Always my shameless plug. If you want to join me for a beer and some pizza, Policy and Pilsner is going to be on the 16th, which is next Tuesday, 6:30, Coca-Cola Beer Company. Any of you are welcome to join.
And
Thank you.
Speaking of shameless plugs, I have a solo art exhibit coming up June 2nd at Next Gallery. It'll be up for about 3 weeks, but the reception is on June 2nd from 5 to 10. And the Next Gallery is in the 40 West Arts Hub in Lakewood, sort of in the Casa Bonita parking lot. And I'll bet you know where that is.
That's awesome, Rich. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Alan.
Yeah, just want to make mention. May is the Jewish Heritage Month. Jews in Westminster and I believe Muslims in Westminster comprise about 0.1% of our population, but they're significant. Jews have offered significant parts to our city, our state, our nation. So I just wanted you to be aware that it's actually this month. And it's not about Holocaust awareness necessarily. But it is talking about how this group of people that is raised or put together as both a religion and I guess an ethnic group, how they have progressed through all kinds of prejudice. We know about anti-Semitism, but have overcome so many different things to move forward in the world. So just wanted to make sure that people are aware of that.
If you guys want to join, that would be a good opportunity too. If anybody on May 22nd, Council is doing a Jewish American Heritage Month proclamation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything
like
else?
to-
Oh,
Yeah,
please.
I'm sorry. I have to be the staff person and remind you there are 4 of you who still haven't completed your onboarding. That's a requirement. I asked for that to be done before this evening. Please make that a priority. We're already about a month behind on that deadline. If we couldn't make it in person, there was an expectation to respond by email to the materials that should all be in your inbox. I believe I sent it last week. If we don't do it in this way, we're not going to have the exception to not to be able to skip it and do something like follow up later. So I just don't want us to lose those sorts of flexibility points. I want to reiterate that there's an attendance policy that's in the city code. If you miss more than, I think it's 2 without an excused absence, then there's a conversation about your level of engagement. We're struggling with that. I would like to also note punctuality is very important. We will be doing everything possible to try to get folks here so that we can have a smooth running meeting. We've had some struggles with that. Again, we don't want to lose the flexibility option in having hybrid meetings. So if we could just be mindful of those sorts of pieces, then we have a quorum at 6 p.m. and we can run a meeting, those sorts of things. I think that's really important. And I want to make sure we're all at our best selves so that the flexibility can still exist for this group, because I know that's important to the work and to our engagement right now. And I don't want to lose that. So I just want to make sure that we're all here and active and all of those things. And then we currently have 12 members on the board. So of those members, 10 are currently full members. We still have 2 alternates until we get to attrition, all the way through attrition, and there are only 9. So unfortunately, Alan and Steve, although fantastic participants and doing great things and helping us make quorums and pinches and other things, very actively involved members, are technically considered alternates until 3 more people are no longer on this board. I just want to, I'm sorry, I don't like being rules because you know how I feel about them, but I do need to keep us in the right direction.
Thank you, Cody. Points well made. And to ensure again that like those alternates can be a part of quorum in the absence of other members. So if there is a lack of punctuality, we will begin the meeting once we have quorum, regardless of who's sitting here, whether it's an alternate or it's a regular member. So yeah, please try to do your best. And if there's any issue with time thing, of course, we all have so many things going on. Just let us know.
In absences, if you could send your I'm not going to be here to both Justin and me, because we track them. And if I don't know if Jake and I don't know that you've asked for it for the reasons that exist in code, we just have it as an absence. And that for us is then an unexcused absence. So.
Okay.
Food for thought.
Thanks, Mom.
We will,
Sorry.
yeah, we will.
Yeah,
we will chew on that note.
You know, this isn't the fun part for me, but
No. You got it.
And most of you are here tonight, so I was like, we need to get these messages out now while everybody's.
Yeah, well made, Cody. Thank you. We do have to maintain structures because, you know, those are important to uphold. There's a reason for all of it. So, okay. Anything else for the good of all? Oh, yes,
Justin,
Steve.
is this the point where we talk about future meeting topics?
I mean, it's usually.
That's just on there as a note.
Yeah, it's just kind of a for your reference, Steve, we usually have done, but if you have questions or anything about that, we can certainly address them in the next few minutes.
Well, I guess I suggested we initiate outreach to the community engagement folks, since that's involved in one of our potential tasks and goals in our plan for the upcoming year. And I think Cody suggested, well, if the board wants to do that, then maybe we can schedule it in, I think, August.
Right. In July, the police chief would like to come to talk to you about the hiring of the next deputy police chief. We have a vacancy on that team, and he'd like some of your insights and to that process. I think they're posting it pretty quick here, but it'll be, starting to get into the candidate pool. I'm not sure if he'll ask for volunteers. I know we had some of our members on panels with his hiring process. So I'm not sure of all the things, but he'd like to come to the June meeting and then, or the July meeting, because June is police, the police advisory meeting. Miguel represents this group there. So he'd like to come July, and then it would make sense that the community outreach liaison maybe comes in August, if that is reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
No, wait, sorry, and I had a third person. Sorry. Oh, July is the equitable process coordinator also. So he and the chief would go the same night, which sort of goes together. Not
Okay.
together exactly, but they would have similar topics.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, it is 7:29, so we want to honor your time. Thank you very much for all of your energy, all of your work. Do follow up on the emails. I know I will publicly go on record and be like, I think mine is still in draft. So Cody, I will have that information to you shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks for keeping me in line.
Thank you. Justin, will you stay for 1 second?
Yep, absolutely. All right, and we appreciate all of you. We will officially call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's person.
Bye. See you, everybody.
Bye.
That's true.
Good
She was
night. Good night.
Good night.
Heather in Westminster.
Hi, friend.